My son never hung up the phone after we finished talking. I could hear him laughing with his wife. Then came the words that cut deeper than anything he had ever said to my face. He is he is too blind to notice, too stupid to understand. Hearing that from my own flesh and blood felt like taking a hit right across the face. I did not make a sound. I just placed the phone back on its cradle and drove straight to the bank. 1 month later, I handed him a folder with my signature on the front and said calmly, "I will see you in court." He looked scared. He should have been. He thought it was the end of his mistake. What he did not realize was that it was only the beginning of my plan. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. It started a few weeks earlier. And please. Thanks, Dad. I will pay you back next month, I promise. Daniel's voice carried that same tired tone I had grown used to over the years. Tight, strained, almost rehearsed. Another crisis. Another bill he could not manage on his bartender's pay. "Do not worry about it, son," I told him. "Family helps family." And I meant it. Just like I had meant it every other time before. The phone was warm against my ear as I leaned back in my kitchen chair, watching the late afternoon sun spill through the curtains. "All right. Well, I have to run," I said. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Daniel." I waited for the familiar click that meant the call was over, but it never came. Instead, I heard the soft sound of the receiver being set down and the shuffle of footsteps moving away. Daniel had forgotten to hang up. I was about to end the call myself when I heard Jessica's voice, sharp, curious. "Did he notice the card withdrawals this time?" My hand froze on the phone. Daniel's laugh came through loud and careless. He is too blind to see that and too dumb to figure it out even if he did. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. "How much did you take this week?" Jessica asked, casual as if she were asking about the weather. 3,000. Easy money. The old man's personal identification number was a joke to guess. Who uses their wedding date? Daniel's voice drifted as he walked around their apartment. He has been such a sucker all these years. I felt something cold and heavy take root in my chest. My wedding date. The day I married his mother, Margaret. The day I once told him when he was 12 that it was the happiest day of my life. Slowly, carefully, I hung up. My hands shook as I opened my banking application, and there it was. Automated teller machine withdrawal, $6,000. 3 days earlier, $3,200. Last week, $5,000. Transaction after transaction, going back months, maybe longer. Each one like another knife to the gut. The money I had spent 42 years putting away. The savings I built by skipping vacations, buying store-brand groceries, and driving the same old car for 17 years. All of it for Daniel. To pay for his tuition after Margaret died. To help him start his life. To cover the down payment on his apartment. I could still see that acceptance letter to Arizona State sitting on my kitchen table after the funeral. Tuition, $32,000 a year. I had cashed out half my retirement without a second thought. For Daniel's future, I told myself. Margaret would have wanted this. Now, years later, I sat in that same kitchen, staring at my phone screen as my life savings vanished. $6,000 at a time. What rose inside me was not grief. It was not loneliness. It was something harder, sharper, rage. I stood by the window, looking out at my neighbor mowing his lawn across the street. Everything outside carried on like normal, birds chirping, engines humming, as if my entire world had not just fallen apart. Daniel thought I was blind, that I was too old, too slow to notice. I stared at my reflection in the window. 67 years old. Gray hair, same cardigan I had worn for a decade. Maybe I did look harmless. Maybe I had been, once. But that ended tonight. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found what I needed. Tomorrow, I would start digging for answers. How he got my code, how long this had been going on, and how to make sure it never happened again. The plan began to take shape as the sun went down. Daniel thought he was clever, thought he was smarter than his old man. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand. It tasted bitter, but it cleared my head. I had spent all night thinking, and I knew what I had to do. If I changed my PIN too soon, he would know I was onto him. I could not afford that yet. I needed to understand everything first. I got dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would help me blend in where I was going. The Silver Dollar Tavern sat in downtown Phoenix, a dim bar where the lights never seemed to fully work. That was where Daniel's best friend, Kevin, tended bar, and I had a feeling he knew more than he realized. If anyone knew the truth behind Daniel's little setup, it would be Kevin. Kevin. The drive over took about 20 minutes, cutting through the same streets I had driven my entire adult life. Every corner carried a memory. Grocery runs with Margaret, dropping Daniel off for school, late night walks after her funeral. She was buried just 10 miles from where I parked now, in Sunset Hills Cemetery. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same city that had seen me build a family, lose my wife, and raise my son was now the place I'd be investigating him. The tavern's neon sign buzzed and flickered, sputtering like it was struggling to stay alive. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of grease, old beer, and the faint trace of disappointment that clung to places like this. It was barely noon, but a few regulars already sat slumped at the bar, nursing their midday drinks. I took a stool at the far end, where I could see without being seen. Kevin glanced up from behind the counter, drying a glass with a towel. When he recognized me, his whole face brightened. "Mr. Miller, it has been ages. How are you?" "Getting by," I said. "Just stopped in for a quick drink." He poured me a bourbon neat with the kind of muscle memory only years behind a bar can teach. The amber light from the back mirror shimmered across the glass as he set it down in front of me. "Daniel mentioned you've been helping them out a lot lately?" Kevin said. "That's really kind of you. Family's important." "Always is," I said, letting the whiskey burn its way down before setting the glass back on the bar. "Speaking of family, how's Daniel doing with money these days? He seems a little less worried lately." For a moment, Kevin's easy smile faltered. He shrugged, pretending to focus on the counter. "Yeah, he's been more relaxed. Says he figured out a system." "A system?" I asked lightly, keeping my tone easy. "Sounds like him, always good with numbers." "Well, you know how it is," Kevin said, scrubbing the same spot again and again. "People find ways to make ends meet." I leaned forward, lowering my voice a notch. "Between you and me, I've been having a rough time keeping track of my own banking lately. Keep forgetting my personal identification number. You young folks must have better tricks for remembering those things." That got him to relax. He laughed. "Man, that's tough. I used to use my birthday, but Daniel said that was too obvious. He likes using meaningful dates. Told me once he figured out his dad's PIN that way, just tried special family dates until one worked." My heart started pounding hard enough I could feel it in my throat, but I kept my voice even. "Smart kid. What kind of dates are we talking about?" Kevin hesitated. "He said he tried your birthday first, then his mom's, and then—" He stopped himself, realizing he might be saying too much. I probably shouldn't be talking about that. I smiled like it was nothing. "No harm done. I'm just impressed he remembers all those dates." I lifted my glass slightly. "Here's to good memories." The phrase hit me right in the chest. I saw it clear as day. Daniel at 12, sitting beside me on the back porch after Margaret's funeral, eyes red and wet. "Tell me about the day you married Mom," he had whispered. "Tell me about when you were happy," so I told him. About the way Margaret looked walking down the aisle. About how my hands shook when I slipped the ring on her finger. About how we danced to Unforgettable under a sky full of string lights. April 15th, 1982. I had chosen that same date as my PIN years later when the bank switched to 4-digit codes. Kevin kept talking, oblivious to what he had just revealed. "He said it was your anniversary. Kinda sweet, honestly, that you still use it after all these years." I downed the rest of my bourbon in a single swallow. The burn didn't hurt half as much as what I was feeling inside. "Well," I said quietly, setting the glass down, "you know what they say about old habits." I slid a 20 across the counter. "Keep the change, and maybe let's keep this chat between us. Daniel might be embarrassed, talking about money and all." "Of course, Mr. Miller," Kevin said quickly. "You got it." I stepped out into the daylight, the air cool and sharp against my face. My legs felt unsteady as I crossed the parking lot. By the time I reached my car, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went pale. That date, our date, had become the key to my son's betrayal. I started the engine and pulled out onto the road. The city blurred past in shades of gray and green. I rehearsed what I would say when I saw him, every word shaping itself in my mind. Daniel thought he was clever. thought he could twist my love for his mother into a tool for stealing from me. He was about to learn that some memories are worth fighting for. The steering wheel bit into my palms as I pulled up in front of his duplex. The grass was overgrown, a mess compared to my yard. I had helped pay for this place 4 years ago. The irony made my jaw tighten. I knocked 3 times, steady, deliberate. Daniel answered in sweatpants and a stained shirt, hair sticking up like he had just rolled out of bed at 2 in the afternoon. His expression shifted from confusion to forced cheer. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I know everything," I said evenly. "Return my money." His mouth opened, then closed. "What money?" Daniel asked, blinking fast. "Dad, I do not know what you are talking about." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded bank statements. The paper crackled in my hand, sharp as the truth itself. "These withdrawals," I said, "my personal identification number, my wedding date." All the color drained from his face. He took a step back, the open door hanging between us like some kind of barrier. "That is impossible," he stammered. "I would never—" "April 15th, 1982, I said flatly, reading the numbers out loud like a verdict. "The day I married your mother, the same date you used to drain my account." "Who told you that?" His voice cracked. The act was falling apart. "Does it matter?" I said, stepping into the house without being asked. The living room looked new. Fresh furniture, a huge flat-screen television mounted high on the wall, things I had never seen before. All of it bought with my money. My memories. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Fine," he said finally. "Yes, I took some, but it is not stealing when it is family." "Some?" I unfolded the papers fully, letting the numbers speak for themselves. $42,000. 9 months. From the kitchen, Jessica's voice cut through the air like glass. "Daniel, what is going on?" He hesitated, then muttered, "Your father-in-law found out about our PIN arrangement." "Arrangement?" I repeated. "That is what we are calling theft now?" Jessica crossed her arms, her tone all edge. "You have more money than you could ever spend. Sitting alone in that big empty house, at least Daniel put it towards something useful." Her words stirred up a memory I had not invited. Daniel's wedding day, 5 years earlier. I could still see him dancing with Jessica under the string lights while I stood off to the side, thinking about Margaret. That night, I had written them a check for $12,000. Every cent saved from years of eating alone in silence, trying to fill the empty chair she left behind. "Useful?" I said quietly, scanning the room again. "You mean that television? Those leather chairs?" Daniel straightened up, his shame hardening into defiance. "You should be grateful it was me and not some stranger," he said. "At least it stayed in the family." Grateful. I let the word roll off my tongue, sour and heavy. "Look, Dad," he went on, waving a hand. "You are overreacting. You do not even need the money. What are you going to do with it anyway? Buy another cardigan?" Jessica laughed, short, cruel, cutting through the air. "He probably does not even remember giving us that pin." I had never given them anything. That pin had been private, sacred. It marked the only day of my life when everything felt whole, when Margaret walked toward me in white lace and promised forever. Now they had turned that memory into a password for theft. "I want every cent back," I said, voice calm but steady. "By next week." Daniel snorted. "Or what? You will call the police on your own son?" The challenge hung there, heavy as a stone. I refolded the statements carefully, slid them back into my jacket, and turned toward the door. "We will see," I said. Behind me, Jessica hissed something I could not catch, and Daniel muttered a low reply. The door shut hard behind me, that sound echoing longer than it should have. In my car, I sat gripping the wheel until my fingers ached. The hum of the engine felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. I pulled away from the curb, my thoughts circling dark and steady. Daniel believed this was finished. He thought I would crawl home embarrassed, play the part of the old fool who finally learned his place. He had no idea what was coming. Back home, the silence was so complete it almost rang in my ears. I hung my coat on its usual hook and stared down the empty hallway, past the quiet rooms that had once been full of laughter. The loneliness pressed in on me, familiar and cold. In the kitchen, I spread the bank papers across the counter. Each line of numbers was a wound. $42,000. Part of me wanted to just let it go. I had enough to live on. Maybe Daniel was right. What was I really going to do with it all? The kettle began to whistle. I poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the color spread through the cup like a bruise blooming under skin. But as the steam rose, another memory surfaced: Daniel's second year at Arizona State. He had called in a panic, saying he needed $6,000 right away for books and lab fees. I had gone straight to the bank and pulled it out of the vacation fund. Margaret and I had been saving for a trip to Scotland before she got sick. We never made it. 3 years later, his car broke down. Another emergency. Another withdrawal from what was left of my retirement savings. Then came the wedding, the apartment deposit, the credit card debt from that doomed business he ran for half a year before quitting. Each time I had told myself it was for his future. I walked into the living room. The mantel was lined with old photos, Margaret smiling from our honeymoon, Daniel tossing his graduation cap into the air while I stood proud behind him. I had given up everything for that boy, my savings, my freedom, my chance to live the life Margaret and I once dreamed about. "You should be grateful it was me," his words echoed in my head. I reached out and traced Margaret's face with my finger. Her smile was soft, endless, full of a faith I no longer felt. Margaret had been the one who pushed to start a college fund the day Daniel was born. "He deserves every opportunity," she'd said, sitting at the kitchen table, counting out a handful of worn bills from her teacher's paycheck. Even then, she was planning for a future she would never see. I lifted the old wedding photo from the mantel. The silver frame had some weight to it, heavier than it looked. April 15th, 1982. The happiest day of my life, now reduced to a 4-digit code my own son had used to rob me. The anger that came wasn't the same wild rush I'd felt before. This one was cold, steady, the kind of feeling that builds slowly until it starts giving you direction. I set the picture down carefully, almost like it might shatter under my fingers. Calling the police crossed my mind. Technically, what Daniel did was fraud, and that carried real consequences. But as much as I hated what he'd done, I couldn't bring myself to throw my son into a cell. Margaret would never forgive me for that. Still, there were other ways to handle theft, lawful ways that didn't involve handcuffs. I climbed the stairs, brushing my teeth while staring at my reflection in the mirror. 67 years old, gray hair, the same cardigan Daniel had mocked. Maybe I looked like an easy mark. Maybe that was why he thought he could take advantage of me. But looks can lie. I shut off the light and slid into bed. The sheets were cool and the house was quiet. Out there, families were finishing dinner, laughing about ordinary things. My own life had stopped being ordinary a long time ago. As I lay there, the pieces began to fit together in my mind. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was balance, justice, and I wanted Daniel to feel the difference between the two. The clock on my nightstand glowed red, 11:47. Tomorrow was Friday, courthouse day. I already knew what I had to do. Calls to make, records to pull, forms to file. 42 years as an engineer had taught me that the smallest mistakes came from poor preparation. I planned on being flawless. When I finally drifted off, my sleep was light, but calm. By morning, my purpose was sharp. Sunlight leaked through the blinds when I got up. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel tired. I showered, shaved, and put on my best suit, the navy one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. It still fit, and it still carried the weight of that day. The drive to Mountain View Bank took about 15 minutes through quiet streets. I parked close to the front doors, folder in hand. Inside were my printed statements, these of every suspicious withdrawal, and notes I'd written through the night. The bank lobby hummed with the kind of artificial energy only fluorescent lights can give. I walked up to the customer service desk where a young woman smiled like it was the first thing she'd been trained to do. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to report unauthorized transactions on my account," I said, setting the folder down in front of her. "Multiple withdrawals. It's fraud." Her smile faded. "Oh, let me get our security manager right away." A few minutes later, I was seated across from a man in his 40s, tie slightly crooked, coffee steaming beside him. "David Peterson," he said, offering a hand. He flipped through my folder, his brow furrowing the farther he went. "These are large sums, Mr. Miller, and you're saying you didn't approve any of these automated teller machine withdrawals?" "Not one," I said. "Someone's been using my personal identification number for months." He took out a yellow legal pad. Do you have any idea who might have access to that number? My son, I said quietly. He knows the dates that matter to me. I pointed to the list of transactions. Notice how none of them exceed $6,000. He's keeping it under the reporting limit. Peterson nodded. That's common in family fraud. We'll need to launch a full investigation. As he spoke, a memory surfaced. Daniel at 16, asking to borrow my car. I'd handed over the keys and my wallet, trusting him completely. He had come home that night early, car full of gas, smiling proud that he'd been responsible. Somewhere between then and now, that boy had vanished. What happens next? I asked. We'll pull surveillance footage from the machines listed here. Peterson explained. Match the timestamps, verify who made the withdrawals. If we can identify the person on camera. He hesitated. Would you be pressing charges if it turns out to be your son? The question sat between us, heavy as concrete. I want my money back, I said. How that happens depends on how cooperative he decides to be. For the next 3 days, I kept up my routines like nothing had changed. Mowed the lawn, sorted tools in the workshop, even cleaned the gutters, though they didn't need it. From the outside, everything looked ordinary. Inside, I was waiting, every muscle wound tight like a live wire. Then, Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang. Mr. Miller? It was Peterson. We finished reviewing the footage. The person making the withdrawals matches your son's description exactly. I gripped the receiver tighter. And? We contacted him this morning to discuss the situation. At first, he denied everything, but when we showed him the footage... Peterson cleared his throat. He became very agitated. Peterson told me my son had gotten angry, said this was a family matter, that the bank had no right to get involved. I tightened my grip on the phone. What happens now? We are required to give him a chance to respond, Peterson said. He can make restitution before we file anything formal. But, Mr. Miller, he did not take the news well. I'm sure he didn't, I said quietly. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The bank had done exactly what I needed them to do. Now Daniel knew I hadn't just caught him on a hunch. He knew his theft had been exposed through official channels. I spent the rest of the evening going through my notes again, preparing for what I already knew was coming. When cornered, Daniel never apologized. He attacked. Margaret used to call it his cornered cat phase. Nothing but claws when he felt trapped. As I lifted my coffee mug, the phone buzzed across the counter. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Daniel. The device kept vibrating, louder somehow with every second, like it wanted to force me to face it. I let it ring 3 times, breathing slow and steady before finally picking up. Hello, Daniel. What the hell did you do? His voice burst through the speaker, sharp and furious. The bank called me. They're accusing me of fraud. I filed a report for unauthorized withdrawals, I said evenly. They're just doing their job. Unauthorized? He shouted. I'm your son. That's family money. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch, let him fill it with his own guilt. Dad, are you there? Say something. I'm listening. The line rustled, muffled voices on his end, and then another voice cut through. Mr. Miller? Jessica's tone was acid sweet. This is absolutely disgusting. Is this your idea of love? Harassing your son with bank investigators? Jessica, I started, but she talked right over me. Daniel's been nothing but good to you. He visits, he calls, he cares, and this is how you repay him? Public humiliation? I'd heard that voice before last Christmas when I'd given Daniel a modest tool set instead of the designer watch he'd hinted about. Same wounded outrage, same twisting of guilt into righteousness. I want my money returned, I said finally. Daniel's breath came through the speaker, heavy and angry. Your money? You're going to die someday, Dad. Who do you think it's going to anyway? I just took an advance. An advance requires permission. Permission? He laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. You want permission? Fine. Here's some for you. Stop this investigation or you're going to regret it. His words hung in the air, cold and deliberate. Regret it how? I asked quietly. You think you're so smart, sitting in that big house all alone, but you need us more than we need you, old man. Behind him, Jessica's voice softened, syrupy and cruel. We're all the family you have left, Mr. Miller. You really want to destroy that over a few dollars. What would Margaret think? That name hit me like a hammer. Margaret. I closed my eyes and saw her again, reading bedtime stories to Daniel, steadying his small hands as he tied his first shoelaces. Margaret would want honesty, I said, especially between family. Daniel laughed again, but this time there was something cracked in it. Honesty? You want honesty? Fine. You're a lonely old man trying to buy affection, and now that someone finally called you out, you can't handle it. I turned toward the window, watching the still street outside. Porches lit, curtains drawn, families finishing dinner, arguing about nothing important. The bank will finish its investigation, I said. Whatever happens next is out of my hands. Then stop it, he demanded. Call them back. I can't do that. Can't or won't. Won't. For a few seconds, the only sounds were traffic from his end and his uneven breathing. Fine, he said at last, his tone flattening into something colder. You want to play this game? We'll play. But don't come crawling to us when you realize what you've lost. Then the line went dead. I placed the phone on the counter slowly, carefully, like setting down an explosive that hadn't finished ticking. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the effort it took to stay calm through 20 straight minutes of venom. I walked to my desk, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and started writing. Every word I could remember. His threats, Jessica's guilt trips, their exact phrases about regret and family. If this went any further, I wanted a record. As I wrote, an old memory forced its way up. Daniel at 26, calling from a police station. It's just a misunderstanding, he'd said. The officer made a mistake. Driving drunk, he meant. I'd driven down, paid the bail, hired a lawyer, and watched him walk out without so much as a thank you. That was 17 years ago. Same pattern, different crime. Some lessons just take longer to teach. Everyone was always wrong except Daniel. That had been the pattern his entire life. I finished the last line of my notes and slid them carefully into a manila folder, tucking it away like evidence for a trial that hadn't started yet. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its usual rhythm. Porch lights blinking on, dogs barking, a lawnmower somewhere in the distance. But I couldn't shake the habit of glancing toward the window every few minutes. Daniel's threats had been vague, but I'd lived long enough to know that the most dangerous people were the ones who felt cornered. They didn't think. They lashed out. By the time I turned in for the night, a siren wailed faintly somewhere beyond the subdivision. It grew louder, then faded into nothing. The sound made me stop halfway to closing my bedroom blinds. Everything looked normal, but there was a stillness out there that didn't feel right. The next 2 days passed in a sort of quiet watchfulness. Grocery runs, emails to old coworkers, morning walks where I kept glancing over my shoulder without meaning to. Everything looked fine on the surface, but I felt like something unseen had shifted, the air itself charged with tension. Then, Thursday morning, a knock shattered the calm. Not a neighbor's knock, an official one. 3 sharp raps, heavy enough to echo through every room. I looked through the living room curtain and froze. 2 police cruisers idled in my driveway, their red and blue lights flashing across my white garage door. 3 officers stood on my porch. One of them held a folded document. I opened the door slowly, keeping my voice steady. I'm Robert Miller. The lead officer, a woman with steel gray eyes and a no-nonsense tone, nodded. Mr. Miller, we have a search warrant for your residence. We received an anonymous tip regarding illegal weapons storage. The words barely made sense. Weapons? Officer, I've never owned a firearm in my life. There's been a mistake. We'll need to confirm that, sir. May we come in? I stepped aside, already knowing what this was. Anonymous tip. The timing was perfect. Too perfect. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. You're going to regret it. In minutes, my quiet house turned into a war zone. Drawers yanked open. Cushions tossed aside. Cabinets emptied. I followed them from room to room, watching decades of order unravel under their hands. Sir, please wait outside while we conduct the search, one of them said. So I stood on the front lawn, barefoot, unshaven, looking like a man caught doing something wrong in front of everyone he'd ever waved to. Neighbors peeked from porches. Phones came up. I could see the glow of their screens as they filmed. Mrs. Rodriguez next door leaned close to her husband, whispering something I couldn't hear but didn't need to. Judgment travels faster than sound. And just like that, another memory surfaced. Daniel's 21st birthday. I'd saved for months to surprise him with a weekend in San Diego. Harbor tours, the zoo, fine dining. He'd hugged me at the train station afterward and said it was the best birthday he'd ever had. Now here I was, standing on my lawn while strangers ripped apart my house because of him. "Mr. Miller?" The lead officer's voice brought me back. "We've completed our search. No weapons found." "Because I don't own any," I said flatly. She gave a small nod. "The tip mentioned specific areas, your basement, your closets. We found nothing to support the report. We'll note that in our file." Her tone softened just a little. "I'm sorry for the disruption, sir." And then they were gone. The flashing lights disappeared around the corner, leaving behind silence and wreckage. I stepped back inside. The front door creaked open like the mouth of something wounded. Books were scattered across the floor, spines bent, pages bent open like wings that would never close right again. Kitchen drawers hung half open, utensils littered the counters. It looked like strangers had lived here for years and left in a hurry. I walked into my study. The computer screen still glowed softly, humming in the dark. In the corner, the Facebook icon blinked. I had never cared much for social media. Margaret had set up the account before she passed. "So you can see pictures of your future grandkids," she'd said, smiling. There were no grandkids, just that account collecting dust. But Daniel and Jessica had changed the rules. I logged in. My fingers moved stiffly over the keys. Jessica's smiling face filled the screen from a vacation photo, some beach trip I'd unknowingly funded. Her latest post sat pinned to the top, uploaded 2 hours earlier. A video. I clicked play. There I was, my own driveway, 2 police cruisers, flashing lights. Officers walking in and out of my home with boxes. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Someone must have filmed the whole thing and sent it straight to her. The caption read, "Unfortunately, my father-in-law has taken a dark turn. We're heartbroken, but not surprised. Mental decline often leads to paranoia and accusations against loved ones. Please keep him in your prayers during this difficult time. Family first. Mental health matters." The comments scrolled fast. So sad when they get like this. My grandmother did the same before we had to move her into care. "Jessica, you're such a saint for handling this with grace." 47 likes, 16 shares. The video spreading like rot. I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were trembling, not from shock anymore, but from fury. The phone rang. I stared at it, half expecting Daniel's name, but it wasn't him. "This is David Peterson from the bank," the voice said. "Mr. Miller, I have an update on your case." "What's the status?" I asked. Peterson hesitated. "It's taking longer than we anticipated. These family cases tend to get complicated. We've spoken with your son again. He's maintaining that the withdrawals were authorized." Authorized? The word shot out sharper than I intended. "I already told you they weren't." "Yes, Mr. Miller, but without additional documentation or a formal complaint, our hands are tied. We can freeze the account, but recovering funds that have already been withdrawn." He let the sentence die there, choosing silence over saying what he really meant. "So what you're telling me," I said slowly, "is that you're not going to help." "We're doing everything we can within our guidelines, sir," Peterson said. "Perhaps this would be better resolved privately within the family." I hung up before he could finish that thought. The laptop sat closed on the desk, but I could still see Jessica's post glowing behind my eyelids. 47 strangers convinced I was a confused old man accusing his loving son of imaginary crimes. I reopened the laptop. The lies stared back at me, dressed up as pity and mental health awareness. That was when the decision solidified in my mind. If they wanted to turn my humiliation into a public spectacle, then I'd give them a story worth watching. Only this time, I'd be the one holding the camera. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. Not a rant, not a letter, but a plan. 42 years as an engineer had taught me one thing. There's no such thing as an unsolvable problem, just one you haven't diagrammed correctly yet. Daniel liked to think of himself as clever. Jessica believed she was manipulative enough to outmaneuver anyone. They were about to learn the difference between clever and calculated. The screen dimmed as I leaned back, thinking. That's when the idea came to me. Time to turn the tables quietly. In my career, every challenge started the same way. Break the system into manageable pieces, identify the weak points, then apply pressure where it hurts most. This was no different. Step 1, documentation. I downloaded a call recording application, the kind divorce lawyers recommend to nervous clients. From that point forward, every conversation with Daniel would be preserved word for word. His threats, his excuses, his tone, proof, not emotion. Step 2, outside help. I dug through the yellow pages until I found him, Thomas Reed Private Investigations. His ad promised discreet services for sensitive family matters. The office was in a faded brick building downtown, the kind of place people walked into when they had run out of options. When we met, I handed him a folder thick with bank statements. $42,000 over 9 months, I said. I need to know where it went. Reed looked mid-40s, sharp eyes, restless hands that never stopped moving, tapping pens, checking his phone, adjusting files. Surveillance isn't cheap, he warned. $350 a day plus expenses. How long will it take to get a full picture? 2 weeks, he said. That should show me everything I need to know about how they're living. As I wrote him the check, a memory surfaced. Back in 1987, the mayor had asked if we could cut corners on a water treatment plant I was designing. Good engineering isn't cheap, I told him then, but fixing bad engineering costs a hell of a lot more. Same rule applied now. Within a week, Reed sent his first report. The pictures hit harder than I expected. Daniel and Jessica at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, luxury hotels, designer boutiques. They looked like a couple who had discovered an endless supply of money. And they had. Mine. But Reed's best discovery wasn't in the photos. It was online. Your son's been bragging, Reed said, flipping his laptop toward me. Daniel's social media account filled the screen, glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "To family money, well spent." Another post said, "Living my best life." Some people know how to enjoy it. My jaw tightened. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was mocking me while doing it. Step 3, the trap. I created a new email address under a fake name and sent myself a forged bank alert. Suspicious activity detected on your account. Then I called Daniel, my phone quietly recording everything. Dad, what's wrong? You sound upset. I just got a message from the bank, I said. They're flagging some unusual withdrawals. Large amounts, always just under 5,000, the Fed. They want me to come in tomorrow to review the security footage. There was a long pause. I could almost hear him swallow. Security footage? His voice cracked slightly. Yes, from the automated teller machines. They can see who's been using my card. Another pause. Then, Dad, maybe you should wait. Don't go to the bank tomorrow. Let me call you back. The line went dead. I set the phone on the desk and let myself smile for the first time in weeks. Pressure always reveals where the cracks are. Daniel had just shown me his, but the plan was far from over. Reed had delivered evidence of their spending. My recordings would capture their panic. The fake alert had proven their guilt beyond question. Now it was time to make it official. Step 4, legal action. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I'd written down earlier that afternoon. Parker and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to schedule a consultation, I said, voice calm, steady. The receptionist paused. May I ask what the case involves? Yes, I said, glancing at the folder full of statements on my desk. I want to sue my son. The photos sat neatly stacked in my folder, each one a small piece of evidence in the case I was building. Reed's surveillance had been meticulous. Daniel and Jessica dining in places where a bottle of wine cost more than my monthly groceries, shopping in boutiques where a single handbag rivaled my utility bills. The law office of Parker and Associates occupied a restored Victorian near downtown, its brass nameplate polished to mirror shine. Attorney Jennifer Parker was younger than I expected, mid-30s, but her questions were quick and deliberate. Mr. Miller, are you certain you want to proceed? Suing family leaves permanent damage. The damage started when my son stole from me, I said. She studied my evidence, bank records, Reed's photographs, and phone recordings where Daniel's panic exposed his guilt. This is strong, she said. The recordings are admissible since you were part of the conversations and the financial trail is clear. What are we looking at for damages? Theft of $42,000 plus interest, court costs, and possibly punitive damages for the pattern of fraud. Her pen moved steadily across the forms. I'll file this afternoon. The courthouse clerk stamped the papers with final authority. Case number CV 2024-1947, Robert Miller versus Daniel Miller and Jessica Miller. For the first time, I wasn't just the victim. I was the plaintiff. On my way home, my phone rang. Daniel. I started the recorder before answering. Dad, we need to talk. Can you drop this bank thing? We can work something out. Work out what exactly? Maybe I borrowed some money without asking, but families don't sue each other over misunderstandings. Borrowing requires permission. Taking without it is theft. Jessica's voice cut in. Tell him we'll pay it back. Slowly. How slowly? I asked. Maybe 75 a month. 150. We're not rich. I thought of Reed's photos from the steakhouse where Daniel had signed for a $75 ribeye. You'll hear from my attorney, I said. Your attorney? Daniel's tone jumped. You can't be serious, Dad. I'm your son. And I was your father, I said. That didn't stop the theft. We'll fight this, he hissed. We'll tell everyone you're losing your mind. The police search proves it. I ended the call without a word. Years ago, when Daniel was 12, he'd been caught stealing candy from a corner store. I'd made him apologize and pay double. Taking what isn't yours is wrong, I'd told him. Back then, he understood. Somewhere along the way, he forgot. That night, I sat in my study reading the complaint Jennifer had prepared. The language was cold, exact. Systematic theft, abuse of trust, fraudulent use of financial information. Reading it felt like watching the end of my family printed in legal ink. But sometimes demolition was necessary. You clear the damage before you rebuild. A text arrived from an unknown number. This is just the beginning, old man. You have no idea what you've started. I forwarded it to Parker with a note, additional evidence of intimidation. Then I opened the bottle of wine Margaret and I had saved for a special occasion. It had aged in our basement for 17 years, waiting for the right night. This was it. Justice deserved a toast. The next month passed in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and preparation. Parker drilled me for testimony, organized exhibits, and walked me through every detail until the morning I stepped into the courthouse. The room was smaller than television made it look, more like a conference space dressed up for battle. Daniel and Jessica sat beside their court-appointed lawyer, who looked too young and too nervous to face what was coming. Judge Helen Crawford opened the session with a single sharp strike of her gavel. This is a civil case concerning alleged theft and fraud. Mr. Miller, you may present your evidence. Parker rose smoothly. Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate systematic theft totaling $42,000, carried out through unauthorized use of the plaintiff's personal identification number. The first exhibit, bank statements, each withdrawal highlighted in yellow. As Parker read the figures aloud, Daniel's complexion drained. April 3rd, $6,000. April 10th, $3,200. April 17th, $5,000. Each number landed like a hammer strike, steady, undeniable. Then came Reed's photographs, Daniel and Jessica laughing in high-end restaurants, shopping for designer brands, Daniel sporting a watch that probably cost more than my car. The photos appeared on the screen for the judge to see. These were taken during the period of alleged theft, Parker said. Notice the defendant's lifestyle. It doesn't align with Mr. Miller's reported income as a part-time bartender. Then came the moment I'd waited for. Parker played the recording from my phone. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom, shaky and panicked. Dad, maybe you should wait. Don't go to the bank tomorrow. Let me call you back. The next clip followed. Look, maybe I did borrow some money without asking. Judge Crawford leaned forward. Did I hear the defendant admit to taking money without permission? Daniel's attorney objected weakly, but it was pointless. The confession spoke for itself. When it was their turn, Daniel took the stand, his hands trembling. Your Honor, my father gave me permission to use his account, he said. He's getting older and forgets things sometimes. Do you have written permission? Parker asked. Well, no, but any witnesses to this supposed permission? It was understood, Daniel said. Family doesn't need paperwork for everything. Parker showed the screenshots Reed had captured. Is this your Instagram post, Mr. Miller? To family money, well spent. Some people know how to enjoy life. Daniel's face drained. That was just a joke. Jessica's turn went worse. She cried on cue, claiming they only took money for necessities, while photos of luxury dinners and designer clothes shone behind her. Groceries cost $2,000 at a steakhouse? Parker asked dryly. As they floundered, my mind flashed back to that night. I overheard Daniel's laughter through the forgotten phone. He's too blind to notice, too dumb to figure it out. Now he sat cornered, choking on his own arrogance, while the truth surrounded him like walls. Judge Crawford needed less than 10 minutes. I find the evidence overwhelming, she said. The defendant systematically stole $42,000 from the plaintiff through deliberate deception. Her gavel struck once. Judgment for the plaintiff, $42,000 in restitution plus legal fees and at a $12,000 penalty. Total, $59,000. The sound echoed like thunder. I stayed perfectly still, letting the moment settle into my bones like long-awaited warmth. Daniel and Jessica looked pale, stunned. $59,000 they didn't have, judgment they couldn't escape. Outside, Daniel grabbed my arm. "Dad, please, we can't pay this. You're destroying us." I met his eyes, Margaret's eyes, and saw nothing but desperation. "You destroyed yourselves," I said quietly. "I just proved it." Parker met me outside the courthouse, her handshake firm. "Congratulations, Mr. Miller. Now comes the fun part, collecting." I walked to my car with the judgment papers tucked in my briefcase, feeling lighter than I had in months. Spring air carried the scent of blooming trees. For the first time since that awful phone call, I could picture a future without bitterness. The enforcement notice arrived a week later. Formal letterhead, legal stamp, the start of Daniel and Jessica's reckoning. Parker explained the process: wage garnishment, asset seizure, frozen accounts, the slow grind of justice turning debt into consequence. Their unraveling came quickly. I drove past their apartment and saw Daniel's BMW parked with a for sale sign taped to the windshield, cheap red ink fading in the sun. 2 days later, Reed called. "They're selling everything, furniture, electronics, jewelry, behind on rent. Word is eviction's next. How much have they managed to raise?" I asked. "Maybe 9,000 so far. Long way to go." Jessica's Instagram went dark. No more restaurant selfies, no vacation photos, no toasts to family money. Their last public post was the day they lost in court. The first payment arrived on a Tuesday. A check for $1,700 drawn from Daniel's account, the memo line reading "court-ordered payment." The teller at my bank processed it without comment, though her glance said she knew the story. Money returning to me through the same bank where Daniel once convinced them I was too senile to notice theft. That afternoon, my phone rang. Jessica. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Mr. Miller, please," she said, her voice strained. "We know we made mistakes, but $59,000 will ruin us. Daniel lost his job because his boss found out about the lawsuit. I'm pregnant. Please." Her voice sounded different this time. No edge, no performance. Just raw desperation. "Jessica," I said evenly, "you both had months to make things right. Instead, you chose threats, humiliation, and lies." "But the baby," she said, "your grandchild." The words hung there, bait dangling on an old hook. She thought I'd fold like always, that the idea of family would make me forget what they'd done. But I'd finally learned the truth. Love doesn't excuse theft. "Any child deserves parents who understand the difference between right and wrong," I said quietly. "Maybe this will teach you both that lesson." I ended the call and sat in the kitchen for a long moment, letting the quiet return. My mind drifted back to that morning months ago. The discovery of their theft, the sting of betrayal, the humiliation of hearing my son call me too blind and too dumb to notice what was right in front of me. Now Daniel was swinging a hammer on construction sites, making half what he'd earned bartending. The fancy watch he'd once flaunted sat in a pawn shop window. Jessica had moved back in with her mother after they lost their apartment to unpaid rent. The court's judgment had stripped away their illusion of success and left them exposed to the truth. Their wealth had been borrowed and stolen. By summer's end, they had repaid $30,000 through asset sales and garnished wages. The remaining $29,000 would take years, maybe decades, assuming they both stayed employed. I deposited their latest payment, a $900 money order, and drove home through quiet neighborhoods where other people's lives carried on untouched by all this. When I parked in the driveway, I sat there for a moment, looking at the house Margaret and I had built together. 42 years of marriage, 35 years of raising Daniel, 17 years of living without her. That first phone call, the one that started it all, felt like it belonged to another lifetime. But the silence around me was different now. It wasn't the hollow stillness of loneliness. It was the calm that comes when everything's finally in order. Problems solved, accounts balanced. Inside, I opened my checkbook and noted the numbers carefully. $59,000 awarded, $30,000 collected, $29,000 still owed. Justice, expressed in dollars and consequences. On the mantle, Margaret smiled from our wedding photo, frozen in the joy of that April day. I'd honored her memory by refusing to excuse wrongdoing just because it came from blood. She would have understood the fight, even if it broke her heart that it was necessary. Outside, the neighborhood eased into its evening rhythm, dogs barking, sprinklers hissing, kids calling home for dinner. Normal sounds, normal lives. I stood there for a while, listening. Inside my house, the quiet felt like victory. If you connected with this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.